Hello, my name is St. Elias. I'm the owner of Crescent City Conjure. I am also a perpetual student of all things metaphysical, occult, and spiritual. Today, I wanted to talk to you about the Bible and its place in the tradition of Hoodoo, Rootwork, and Conjure. When I was around the age of 6, 7, my grandmother gave me this Bible. She has my name inscribed on the front, which I'm not going to share. And at that time, I didn't know or understand the significance of this gift. But what she was doing was passing down the mantle of the family's connection with our ancestors. The tradition of Hoodoo is a legacy tradition, is a lineage tradition. I got it from my grandmother, and then she gave it to me. The Bible is considered the most powerful book of conjure in the tradition of Hoodoo, Rootwork, and Conjure. Because of the transatlantic slave trade, and captured Africans that came from mostly the west coast of Africa and arrived mostly in the southern states of America, had to figure out a new way to allow their spiritual practice to survive. With their exposure to relatively new spiritual traditions like Catholic and Protestant faith that were here in America at the time, they had to reconcile those differences between their African spirituality and the introduction of these new religions of the Catholic and Protestant faith. And what happened was what history calls syncretism. It is taking two intangible things like belief, and putting those together within a people. So in this case, those Africans who were enslaved in America, and coming up with something that reconciles the frictionless parts of those two traditions. So the Bible, into the Bible, it came in as a holy text that was mainly used to oppress. But like everything else in Hoodoo, Rootwork, and Conjure, we take what we have and use it for what we need it to be used for. In this case, it was used for survival. For a lot of people who are new to Hoodoo, Rootwork, and Conjure, I believe that they can think that the Christian Bible is contradictory to the use of magic, spell work, spiritual work, occult, metaphysical practices. And it's understandable, growing up in America, how we can see the Bible being a book that that speaks negatively about these things. But we're not necessarily talking about the Christian religion when we're talking about the Bible in this context. We're talking about how those enslaved people came to know the scripture and how they applied it in a way that allowed their spiritual practice to survive. The old school people who practiced African American folk magic or Hoodoo, Rootwork, and Conjure would identify as Christian. But because of the information age, our new understanding that what happened was syncretism and wasn't Christianity at its purest understanding in the New World, we're able to take the mask of Christianity off of the tradition of Hoodoo, Rootwork, and Conjure, understand its African roots. So while old school may be Christian, it's not necessary to to hold and practice the Christian faith in order to practice Hoodoo, Rootwork, and Conjure, because the battery that powers our tradition is our ancestors. Although those encountered people came from a lot of different places within Africa, they shared many central beliefs, and we can boil those down to 3 beliefs. And those beliefs are veneration of ancestors, that our ancestors still play a large and active role in our lives, providing protection for the family, guidance and support in rough times, and animism, that every living thing has a consciousness and a spirit all its own. And if those 2 first things are true, ancestor veneration and animism, then it should be possible to work with the presence that resides in the spiritual world, resulting in magic or conjure. Those 3 things are what colors and shapes the understanding of the Bible and how it's used in this tradition. The stories themselves were understood in a different way. And for instance, the characters were considered powerful conjure men and conjure women, Moses being the most prominent of them. the miracles that were performed in the Bible were considered spells, powerful works of conjure in order to create change. So it was an inspiring story of overcoming adversity, which I'm sure created a lot of hope within people who didn't have any. While the Bible is chock full of very specific steps in order to create change, some would call those spells or magic, there are other books that very much influence the use of the Bible within the African American culture. A couple of the most noteworthy books are the 6th and 7th books of Moses and the Lesser and Greater Key of Solomon. So, of course, there are other traditions that believe in the spiritual power or the magic that resides in the Bible, most notably the Jewish mysticism, which had communication with the African American culture, mainly in Louisiana, due to the merchants coming into this area and communicating with the African American culture. Information was passed, shared, and evolved through that relationship. But the Bible's verses aren't the only thing that holds power. The book itself was considered a talisman. An old working to stop gossip would be to put the Bible in the eastern cardinal direction of a room and open it up to any page. It didn't matter what page. And it's just the words that had power to stop gossip, and that would be the cure. There are so many verses in the Bible that hold great power, and I think once you are able to separate yourself from any past traumas that may have come with the Christian church, trying to remember your own internal power, which is the whole point of metaphysical occult practices, is that you are powerful, and within your relationship with the world around you, there's there's a lot of change that can occur. When you get over that trauma of a mean sky daddy who's going to send you to heaven or hell, of course that's each person's personal journey, but if you decide to go on that journey, the words in the Bible change significantly. One verse that I love is Psalms 51. Psalms 51 says, "Wash me with hyssop and I'll be whiter than snow." It gives you the herb to use to call spiritual cleanliness. And the entire Psalms is not just a recipe of cleansing, but a recipe on how to mentally deal with past traumas. It's admitting that we are all flawed as human beings, to accept yourself for who you are. And then to say, another part that I really love about it, it gives God a little bit of blame. You made me in sin, so hey, what you expect? These things, I think, really help to bring a little levity to whatever situation you may be in, to accept yourself for wherever you are, gives you the ingredients to use to wash that weight away. And in the process of repeating the Psalms, because we usually repeat the Psalms or the verses 3 times in a row, as that sinks in, I think there's a lot of psychological benefit to that as well. Now, the Bible's not only full of positive things, and this is why we call it a spell book, because it is in the truest sense. It's not just positive things in healing and helping. There are a lot of healing works in Acts. There's a lot of road opening works in Isaiah, and there are a lot of curses in Deuteronomy. And baby, I practice witchcraft, and Deuteronomy has some of the best curses I've ever read in my entire life. And if you are looking at this book, it is noted what's in here and how it works. You can find great power in this book. Once again, I think it's more about separating yourself from any projections of what you think the Bible represents. The Bible isn't the only book that encompasses Abrahamic faith. The Bhagavad Gita and the Quran, all of these books have different pieces that can come together. And once again, we mentioned the 6 and 7 books of Moses and the Lesser Greater Key of Solomon. I think it's a journey of understanding what the message truly was. I think now religion as a whole has a lot of political strings to it and can be used to control the masses. And before I get on my soapbox, we want to be able to go back and see the message as it was meant to be read. So that means going back to original sources, which may surprise you that the Quran mentions the Bible. The Bible mentions the holy books. It's that they're speaking about one another as one common thread. And I think anyone who wants to discover some new truth about about their past relationship with holy books like the Bible, you got to go back. You got to put the pieces together. There's a whole different story being told. It's important to understand that we're not necessarily speaking to the Christian God or Yahweh. We're speaking to our ancestors. And if you're in America, your ancestors were most likely Christian. And you're using words that they are familiar with. And we're building a strong relationship with them. So there's a lot about letting your ego go in this. However you feel about the Bible or the Christian religion, your ancestors believed in it. And speaking to them from their perspective will only add power to your work. It's not necessary to be Christian to practice, and so you don't have to hold on to those faiths. And there's nothing wrong with being Christian to practice either. This is folk magic, which means that you bring your own belief into it. There is a structure, there is history, and there is a way that this should be practiced. But your concept of God doesn't play a huge role in it. As long as you do believe something is above you, that could be your ancestors, because to be honest, that's where this tradition came from. But if you believe in Jesus, God, Jesus, and the Holy Spirit, that's okay too. As long as you're speaking to something that is beyond you. You can call it the great architect, the source, or the Big Bang. It doesn't even matter. It's about extending your belief to fill up a space that is beyond you. That's where the power comes from. If you are a conscious, living, thinking, feeling human being, it only makes sense to believe that there are other things that may not be corporal that are around you. You're not the only source of wisdom, power, strength, and guidance. Your ancestors, which make up the way you look, the food you made, like your disposition, those who came before you, are still playing a huge role in your life. To acknowledge that, and to acknowledge that their power as it came before you is greater than you. And once again, it doesn't matter if it's your ancestors, if it's Jesus, if it's Oshun, if it's Ogun. It doesn't necessarily matter. As long as you bring that belief into that structure, you'll be all right. Once you begin to read and understand the Bible in a more neutral context, a new picture begins to emerge of a puzzle that needs to be put together concerning how real magic can be made through the words presented in the Bible. You may not be able to split the Red Sea, but you can do miracles all the same. Many blessings, and I'll talk to y'all soon. Bye.